Knowing the critical backlash that Passengers has received, I'll admit I went into the film with my expectations set pretty low. Half hour into the showing, I began to wonder why it had been criticised so harshly. Whilst the opening didn't blow me away by any means, I did find myself invested in the story and enjoying what I was watching. However, as the film continued to progress into its second and third acts, more and more problems began to arise, until that initial intrigue and joy that I had experienced completely disappeared. Passengers starts off pretty well, but the longer it goes on, the worse it gets, until I was left with a film that I no longer really wanted to watch. This review contains spoilers, so please don't watch any further if you don't want to hear them. I'll begin with the positives first, which are all pretty much found within the first act of the film. The movie begins with Jim Preston, played by Chris Pratt, being woken up from stasis aboard the Starship Avalon, a ship designated with transporting some 5,000 passengers to Homestead 2, a planet that will take 120 years to reach from Earth. Jim finds out that his stasis pod has malfunctioned, resulting in him waking up 90 years too early, essentially condemning him to a life of loneliness until he eventually dies of old age. What follows is a rather impressive performance from Chris Pratt, as his character experiences a wide range of emotions. First is the initial shock of him waking up alone on a colossal ship. We then see him gradually grow more depressed and desperate as all his attempts to fix his stasis pod fail miserably, culminating in probably one of the best scenes in the movie when he ventures outside the ship, stares into the blackness of space and eventually contemplates taking his own life. Finally, after realising that he doesn't want to die, we see him indulge in all the entertainments the ship has to offer, such as fine food, high-tech video games and luxury suites, until he ends up turning into an unshaven messy slob. Although Chris Pratt is on his own for the majority of the first act, there are some genuinely interesting and funny moments, which is a testament to his acting skills. Unfortunately, the film starts to go downhill when the passenger turns into Passengers. After living alone for over a year aboard the ship, Jim decides that he needs some company, with Jennifer Lawrence's character Aurora taking his fancy. What follows is a bit of a creepy sequence of events, with Jim's character watching all of her video logs over and over, as well as sitting next to her stasis pod and having pretend conversations with her, until he declares that she is perfect for him and decides after some deliberation to wake her so they can be together. It's the equivalent of going on someone's Facebook profile, looking through all their pictures and then declaring your undying love. It's a tad bit weird. On one hand, I actually think the decision to have Jim wake Aurora up was pretty clever. From viewing the trailers, I presume that both of them would have been woken up at the same time due to some other cause. So having Jim do it came as a bit of a shock and was an interesting choice for his character to make. However, on the other hand, it's one of my biggest problems with the movie. Jim is quite likeable throughout the film, but there's no getting away from the fact that this action is a dick move. From viewing Aurora's videos, we learn that she is a writer who dreams of visiting Homestead 2. Jim, due to his selfishness and the fact that he clearly just wants to stick his penis inside of her, destroys her dreams and condemns her to a life with him forever on the spaceship, with her having no choice in the matter. It is revealed in the final act of the film that the ship has sustained heavy damage from a meteor and it requires the two of them to fix it. So I guess it could be argued that if Jim didn't wake Aurora up, everyone including her would have died anyway. But let's be clear here, he didn't know that when he did wake her. I mean, if he did decide to wake her up once he found out about the damage to the ship because he thought she might be of some assistance, that's fine, I can deal with that. But the fact that he woke her up because he decided his needs were more important than hers just feels kind of wrong. After Aurora wakes up, the second act of the film focuses on her and Jim falling in love and spending time together. This eventually comes to a temporary end when the android bar assistant, played by Michael Sheen, accidentally spills the beans to Aurora about how she came out of stasis, with her then not wanting anything else to do with Jim until towards the end of the film. The entire second act feels way too long. Whilst it was interesting witnessing Jim develop during the first act, seeing him and Aurora go on countless dates, play the same video game that we'd already see him play, and view a passing star together, which I don't know how it didn't make them go blind, just pales in comparison. To put it bluntly, the second act is bland, with the viewers just sitting and waiting for the obvious confrontation between Aurora and Jim to take place. After the two star-crossed lovers have their argument, they eventually reconcile when they learn that the reason Jim's character was woken up in the first place was due to the ship passing through an asteroid field and sustaining damage to many of its internal systems. I found this revelation to be quite disappointing, as one of the most interesting aspects of the film was the question of why Jim specifically had been taken out of stasis. I found myself early on in the film thinking that maybe he had been chosen by someone aboard the ship, and that the whole thing was part of some kind of grand plan. Finding out that it was just entirely random due to an asteroid colliding with the ship, in my opinion made the film a lot less interesting and was a big missed opportunity. Anyway, in order to fix the ship's problems, Jim and Aurora have to vent the reactor core, otherwise the 5,000 passengers aboard the Avalon will all burn and die. The two of them manage to eventually vent the core, with Jim nearly dying in the process. The film then ends with Jim finding another stasis pod and declaring that Aurora enter it alone so she can go back to sleep for another 88 years and make it to Homestead 2. Aurora decides that she doesn't want to and lives out the rest of her days aboard the ship, presumably happy with Jim. This ending really irked me. Whilst I'll admit the two characters did go through a lot in their time together, it still felt wrong that Jim essentially stalked Aurora, woke her up against her will because he thought she was good looking, lied to her about doing so, and then lived happily ever after with her on a spaceship until they both died of old age. I mean, come on, is this really what love is about? Spying on someone and forcing them into situations? The plot of the movie in simple terms is pretty much just about a ship that gets hit by an asteroid and is repaired by two passengers aboard it. There's no interesting mystery behind why the two characters wake up. Instead, the film is just a dodgy love story set in space. I feel the best part of this movie is the beginning act when it's only Chris Pratt on the screen. Unfortunately, after Jennifer Lawrence joins the fray, through no fault of her own, the film descends into an awkward and creepy messed up attempt at romance, which you would all do well to avoid.